Hello, everybody, and welcome to your favorite NFL podcast, Students of the Game, here with Elijah Freeman. We will be recapping Week 14 this week. Elijah Freeman, let's start with our big wins, huh?
Big wins, and this is a win that started off the week. It seems like quite a bit ago because we had a whole great Sunday of NFL action, but I'm going to go all the way back to last Thursday night, and that was the Arizona Cardinals getting their 11th win of the season, clinching a playoff spot, not yet the division title in the NFC West, but this clinched them a playoff spot for the second straight year, and they beat the Minnesota Vikings in a really quite entertaining game, back and forth, 23-20. And this game was close very much up until the end, but the Cardinals' defense ultimately made a play. Dwight Freeney showing he's still got it after I don't even know how many years in the league.
A lot.
Causing that sack fumble at the end on Teddy Bridgewater that ultimately ended the game. So, Justin, what did you make of the Cardinals' 11th victory of the season to put them as one of the best teams in the NFL?
You know, we've talked about this a lot. You know, you and I both love this Cardinals team just because how their firepower on offense is incredible. And we know how good their defense is, especially in the secondary. And they did a great job of holding Adrian Peterson to just 67 or 69 rushing yards in this game.
And that was after a great start by Peterson, too. I think he had probably about 30 or 40 yards in just the first quarter, and it scored a touchdown on an early drive. I want to say I looked up a stat, and that his last, 18, 19 carries of the game wound up netting him only about 25 yards.
Yeah, he had a big, 25-yard carry I'm seeing here in the first quarter with 5 minutes left. So really great job by the Cardinals defense of shutting Peterson down. And Bridgewater actually played pretty decent. He still can't throw the football down the field very effectively.
Well,
and
but
that plays right into the Cardinals' hands. So
he racked up quite a few yards, though. I mean, they did shut Peterson, I should say, down, but Bridgewater was effective for the most part, racked up 335 yards. I'm guessing that's a season high, knowing what I know about Bridgewater's stats on the year. But it was kind of matched by Carson Palmer. These guys had very similar numbers, the same number of completions, 25, and on 36 attempts for Bridgewater and 35 for Palmer, and 300 yards passing for Carson Palmer as well, threw 2 early touchdown passes. I think both of them were in the first half. And David Johnson, the rookie, kind of the third option that the Cardinals were going to have running the ball. First it was Chris Johnson, and then he got hurt, and then Andre Ellington is always hurt, so moves on to David Johnson. But he had 19 carries for 92 yards.
And they've been plugging new guys into this running back role all season long, and it seems like there's been a lot of teams in the league that are doing that now. But yeah, they can put anybody in there in the backfield and be successful just because everybody's worried so much about the passing attack. And really, this offensive line for Arizona has not been talked about enough, but it's phenomenal. Cooper came back from injuries, played well. Big addition with Mikey Potty from San Francisco. And Valdir has been great ever since he came from Oakland. So this offensive line has really been key, especially for Carson Palmer, who I don't think he's been sacked hardly at all this season. And
I'm going to find you some stats on that, but
okay, sure.
I think they're probably not a whole lot. It looks like 21 sacks in the season. That's really, probably averages out to less than 2 a game.
Less than 2 a game.
That is pretty impressive. You are correct.
For a not very mobile quarterback too. That's the thing.
Right, but on his touchdown to John Brown in the first half, the way he climbed up in the pocket, kind of scampered around, and then moved so that Brown would be open on a late breaking route was very impressive.
I really want Carson Palmer to win the MVP, but we can talk about that later.
He'd have a case for it.
He'd have a case for it. Moving forward here. The New England Patriots, no matter how many players get injured on their team, still find a way to win against a hot Texans team. How'd they do it?
Well, they did it in this case this game was it was supposed to be closer than this, I feel like, but they jumped out early against the Texans, and then they just shut them down completely. Jabal Sheard, who they just basically stole from the Cleveland Browns.
Straight steal. I told people he was going to be a great pickup no matter where he went, and he definitely
Well, I mean, how many sacks did he have of Brian Hoyer or whoever else they put in there after he knocked Hoyer out of the game? It was 2 sacks. Kind of felt like it was more than that even, but they got also a couple of sacks from Akeem Hicks. Dominic Easley got on the game. Rob Ninkovich, I'm counting 6 sacks of Brian Hoyer.
Akeem Hicks, by the way, they stole from the Saints for nothing as well. So it seems like the Patriots are one of those organizations where they can pick guys up from anywhere and do well. And you're going to see that again because the Falcons waived Leonard Hankerson. The Patriots picked him up today.
He'll probably catch like 10 catches for 100 yards.
The problem with Hankerson, though, is I think he had the highest drop rate in the NFL, if I remember, because that's what I got.
He'll stop dropping passes just as soon as he gets to the Patriots.
Probably. It looks like Jadeveon Clowney had 2 sacks in this game, which is
rare. I mean that's a minor development for the Texans. I guess could be good news moving forward. But with the Patriots, All the kind of panic about those two straight losses to the Broncos and then the Eagles at home, especially, that was probably the most concerning of the two, was kind of quieted because Tom Brady was back to being himself, 22 of 30, 226 yards. So not a lot, but he did throw 2 touchdowns, mainly because Rob Gronkowski returned and had 4 catches for 87 yards and a touchdown, like he usually does. I mean, the return of Gronkowski, I think, is huge. He is the second most important player on that roster, as far as I'm concerned, minus just Tom. And they even lost LeGarrette Blount in this game. He's not going to be around the rest of the season, as I understand.
Yes, you're correct. With a
Blount to IR with a hip injury, and we'll kind of examine that a little bit more later. But now they're apparently maybe going to pick up Steven Jackson. James White is going to have a greater role. Brandon Bolden.
They signed Monte Ball to their practice squad, by the way.
But it really doesn't matter with the Patriots. I will continue to insist that as long as Brady and Belichick are there, they're going to be just, right. Might as well just pencil them into the playoffs before the season even starts. And they win the division ultimately after the Dolphins lose on Monday Night Football. So it's another division crown for the Patriots. Ho hum, lather, rinse, repeat. They're always in this exact position.
This is one of the greatest runs we've ever seen in sports, let alone just the NFL. Brady and Belichick together are, regardless of all the scandals, people who are jealous about them, whatever, they're going to go down in history as one of the best, if not the best, coach-quarterback combination in the entire history of the NFL. And I love watching them play. I love seeing them dominate every year. And it's just the thing about those regular season games, if they lose, who cares? It doesn't matter until they get to the playoffs because they already have 11 wins. So what does it matter if they drop a couple games here or there? It doesn't matter.
And there was a kind of a period of time where they had actually, based on the playoff standings, been surpassed by both the Broncos, who had beaten them, and the Bengals by virtue of a tiebreak. So the Patriots had gone from being this undefeated team all season long, leading the AFC kind of, especially with Cincinnati and Denver faltering a bit. And then it was kind of like, oh, okay, now these other teams have surpassed them. And now the Patriots, after this week, are right back to the top of the AFC, where I assume they will presumably continue to be and probably get the number 1 seed and home field advantage for the playoffs like usual. So that's just kind of ho-hum, just another year in the Patriots.
Yeah, wouldn't it be nice to be a Patriots fan?
What else is new? Speaking of AFC teams that had strong victories, I just mentioned that the Bengals had been doing pretty well, but all of a sudden they weren't, and that beatdown was given to them courtesy of the Pittsburgh Steelers. So tell me more about that Sunday afternoon game in Cincy, Justin.
So, the underlying factor here, of course, is, Dalton left this game when he ended up fracturing his thumb, and so A.J. McCarron had to come in and try and save the day, who actually played really well.
He was not awful.
He played really well, and I saw he made a comment earlier this week where Brady did the same thing, so he's already trying to compare himself that he can do what Brady has done since they both got into the
I don't know
league
if it's quite that. I mean, that could be the implication of that statement, but I think he's just kind of saying, hey, look, this is how Brady got his shot, not saying that he's going to be Brady, but saying it's a kind of comparable situation, perhaps. But in any case, you are correct. That's the big development out of this game. But from the Steelers' perspective, how did they manage to win this game by 2 scores?
It's really odd because Roethlisberger didn't throw a touchdown pass.
He did not.
First time in a very long time, obviously, when he plays the whole game. And Martavis Bryant was shut down, and so was Antonio Brown for the most part. They got their yards, but that was it. And D'Angelo Williams, those 2 scores are the big deal here, but he didn't rush for many yards per carry either. I think the big difference was it definitely had to be William Gay's interception return for a touchdown, the pick 6 in the third quarter.
Right at the beginning of the quarter, really broke the back of the Bengals, I feel like.
And all the field goals from Boswell as well, was key for the Steelers, which I think is important because, we usually expect those 350-yard, 4-touchdown pass games from Roethlisberger every week, and that's how we think they're going to win. I think it's important for the Steelers moving forward, not only to beat Cincinnati, a division rival who's ahead of them on the road, but also because they won without Roethlisberger throwing a touchdown pass.
That is true. He was 30 of 39 for 282 yards and threw a pick. So that great completion percentage, piled up some yards, but not a ton, like you said. But they just have so many weapons. I think they're just going to be just fine, and they can win a lot of different ways. Speaking of teams that can win, but don't usually win very often, the NFC East, everyone.
That is so weird because we talked about them being the worst division in football, and 3 of them were able to win this week, and that's why they're huge wins. We have the Eagles with a win, the Redskins with a win, the Giants with a win, the Cowboys, the only team who fell to the Packers, and a dismal showing again from Matt Castle and, of course, Des Bryant. Which one do you think is the bigger implication here?
of those wins in the NFC.
Yeah, the NFC East. Yeah, which three is more important, do you think?
Well, I think the team that beat the best team was probably the Philadelphia Eagles, beating the Bills, who are just so wildly inconsistent, but certainly very talented. And they got that win. Now it's their second straight win. They've beaten these two AFC teams. And so I think that they had probably the most to gain from a victory. The Giants beating the Dolphins doesn't surprise me because the Dolphins aren't any good. And the fact that the Redskins beat the Bears is noteworthy only because people getting all excited about the Bears maybe making a wild card run, well, that's over with now. The fact is all of them are 6-7. None of them are very good. And I also think that this division is probably going to come down to, I don't even know, but I do think looking forward to this upcoming week, the Redskins have the easiest opponent because guess who the Giants have to play? The undefeated Panthers, and the Eagles have to play the red-hot Cardinals. So my guess is those teams are both going to lose, and the Redskins will probably be on top of this division with 2 games left because their opponent this next week, I believe, is the Bills, who obviously can be beaten.
Right, so it's very possible all 3 teams could lose right after all 3 won.
It could be all the 3 teams lose. I'm especially thinking those teams have to go play, the Panthers and Cardinals.
The most impressive win out of the bunch for me was definitely the New York Giants after what we watched. The Dolphins came out hot. Lamar Miller was hot. They played really well at home, but the Giants still found a way to overcome that. Odell Beckham Jr. took over in the second half.
Yeah, we'll talk a little bit more about him later, but he is nuts. He definitely... And Manning,
definitely nuts.
Manning threw as many incompletions as touchdown passes.
He's so inconsistent. It's so crazy. I can't imagine being a Giants fan having to deal with the ups and the highs and lows of Eli Manning.
There's been some high highs, and there's also been years where he leads the NFL in interceptions by a wide margin.
But I think that was the biggest win in the division, I think, for the Giants. And I also think that the Giants are the best team just because I think they have the best quarterback and they have the best player in Odell Beckham Jr. possibly.
They should be far ahead of any other team in this division and would be if they could win the last 45 seconds of games. Seriously, how many times have they blown a lead with a minute or 2 left to go?
Well, they were able to finally win a close game this week, which
Congratulations
is
to the Giants for winning on Monday Night Football. A surprisingly entertaining game between 2 not very good teams.
So those were the highs of the week for these teams, and as we near closer to the playoffs, there are some teams that possibly could have lost a lot.
Yes, and one of them is the Indianapolis Colts, and I want to tell you about the scoring summary of this game because it was remarkable to me. I kind of like the Jaguars. I'm like a closeted Jags fan.
I think it's easy to cheer for Blake Bortles.
Blake Bortles is kind of my guy. I love the Allen boys, Allen Hurns, Allen Robinson. Both of them had huge games in this one. But early on, things were looking pretty good for the Colts. They had a 13-3 lead actually after Robert Mathis, I should say, had a fumble recovery in the end zone off of kind of a bad snap off Blake Bortles' hand. So it was 13-3. And from there, they got outscored 48-3. The Colts got outscored 48-3. And yet, this is a team that is tied for the division lead in the AFC South, which is just as bad, if not worse, than the NFC East. But the Colts were awful to close this game. They all of a sudden couldn't stop a nosebleed, all these touchdown passes. There was a special teams touchdown on a punt return. They had their own fumble off of Matt Hasselbeck that Andre Branch scooped up and scored. They 48-3 from like the second quarter on. It was terrible.
This Jaguars offense has some real potential if they can find some offensive linemen. They have all of the talent. T.J. Yeldon's hurt now, but he was having a pretty solid season for himself. And this game is just surprising because we talk about how the Colts normally dominate other NFC South competition.
Right, this was the first loss they had in the division, I think, since 2012.
And you know who they lost to? The Jaguars. They actually got swept by the Jaguars that year.
So
that's the last time the Jaguars beat the Colts was in 2012.
So it has been a long time since the Jags were, not a long time, but the Jags haven't been even really relevant recently. But yet they dropped a 50-burger on the Colts. And yet this is a big loss in the sense that it was like the biggest margin of victory, I think, possibly. Although, no, never mind. The Falcons.
Yeah,
the Falcons.
It's always the Falcons.
Yeah. But, so they got whooped. They got blown out. But guess what? It's not even a big loss in the sense that it really wrecks their playoff chances because this division is so bad. They still might win. They have a huge matchup, Texans versus Colts, on Sunday, kind of to have control of the division. But don't count the Jaguars out yet because if both those teams keep losing, Texans and Colts, who both lost last week, hey, the Jaguars are only one game out as well.
Right. Another team that had a disappointing loss, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, who were
This
on,
one was this one was the biggest one of the week to me.
they were on an uprise. You know, I know the Bucks pretty well, so I was never really considering them a chance to get in the playoffs for a reason like this. I didn't think that they don't have all of the talent yet that they need, but obviously that offense has been great under Winston, but it wasn't great against the worst defense in football, only scoring 17 points, and that really does you in, and that's probably going to do it in for Tampa Bay for any chance of the playoffs hopes as well.
Right, they were right there, but with Seattle winning, they're 8-5, as are the Vikings. Those are two wild card teams in the NFC right now. The Bucks, if they had won this game, would be 7-6, and then they're right there. Now they're 6-7, and I don't know that they can pull that off, especially as hot as the Seahawks are. And maybe they could possibly catch the Vikings if the Vikings really falter down the stretch. It's just not going to happen. So they blew their chance of playing at home against a Saints team that, like you said, just had a terrible defense. But yet, Doug Martin, who's been one of has number 2 rusher in the NFL yardage-wise, doesn't crack 100 yards.
My question, I didn't watch this game, why did he carry the ball 11 times?
11 times for 81 yards. And
That's ridiculous.
It wasn't really, though, because Winston was throwing the ball a lot, though, because he only had 32 pass attempts. It's not like he had 42 or 52.
You got to give Martin the ball more than that.
I'd have to believe the time of possession in this game was a little skewed, considering Tim Hightower got 28 carries and Drew Brees threw the ball 41 times. They just didn't have the plays, which leads me to believe, having not watched much of this game either, that the Saints just must have ball-dominant control the clock.
37 to 22 minutes.
So they couldn't the defense couldn't get off the field all of a sudden, and really the Buccaneers' offense didn't score much either. Winston does throw a touchdown pass, and Doug Martin does find the end zone, but they couldn't really get the receivers involved. Mike Evans only had 3 catches, and Vincent Jackson only had 1. That's not good. So that was a big loss. They should have had that one, I feel like. And speaking of teams that you usually think, and this is a little bit in that Colts vein where you're like, oh, of course they're going to beat this team in the division who's never been very good recently. The Denver Broncos losing to the Raiders also at home.
Yeah, this was the biggest loss, I think, for me. Not for playoff implications, but just because...
Is this a changing of the guard, kind of, or what?
In the game where there wasn't much scoring, the Broncos were up 12-0 with 4 field goals. And, pretty much everybody turned this game. Amari Cooper didn't catch a pass in this game.
Wow.
He was targeted 8 times. Carr threw to Cooper 8 times, and he didn't catch any of them. So, the defense played pretty well. The problem is the offense couldn't get out of their own way, part to do with number 52, who we'll talk about later, who forced a safety and things like that. But
wait, did what's-his-face? Oh, his name is escaping me. Did C.J. Anderson play in this game?
I don't know. He did not record a carry in this game, no.
Does that mean he did not play, or I'm not exactly sure, but they couldn't run the ball at all.
No, they couldn't run the ball at all.
12 carries for 20 yards as your leading rusher and Rodney Hillman.
I'm sorry, Brock Osweiler has a decent future in this league, but he can't throw 51 times.
Especially when he's under duress like he was from the Raiders.
It's so weird. They're up 12-0. McManus had 4 field goals. The problem is they're all inside 45 yards, means they didn't get it done when they needed to score touchdowns in the red zone, which is why they ended up losing.
Especially the last couple. They were in the red zone on all of these, I think, maybe with the exception of that first one where they were almost to the red zone. So they were at least in that inside the 25-yard line, even on the longest one, a 41-yard field goal. They kept settling for field goals. They could have buried the Raiders in this game, and they didn't.
Do you want to know why the Broncos offense is struggling other than, the quarterback's issue? Would you like me to read off their 5 starting linemen?
Sure. Is it just
Are you ready?
A disaster?
Are you ready? Left tackle Ryan Harris.
Okay. Never heard of him, but I don't know a lot of linemen.
Left guard Evan Mathis. Everybody knows Evan Mathis.
Evan Mathis, right.
Center Matt Paredes.
Sure.
Right guard Louis Vasquez, who is he's decent.
That's a familiar face.
And then right tackle Michael Schofield. Who surrendered 4 sacks alone to Mr. Mack in this game.
I thought it was 5. Isn't it 5?
Mack had 1 on the other side of the line is what I'm talking about.
Oh, okay, so he individually gave up 4 of the 5 sacks. And
as a right tackle, not a left, as a right. The right tackle technically sees the lesser talent of the pass rushers.
You would think
not
so.
In this case, obviously.
But boy, that's not good. And you can't throw the ball 51 times. Not like they were even behind in this game. They must have just decided to abandon the run. I guess Anderson may not have been playing.
If you would have told me Derek Carr threw for 135 yards, Latavius Murray ran for 27, and Amari Cooper didn't catch a pass, I would have said there's no way the Raiders
Well, they should have lost
game.
by 20 if that was the case.
That this just.
But they won the game.
There are problems in Denver right now, and it's that offense.
And the problem is absolutely that just the red zone failures repeatedly. They let the Raiders stay around, and they paid the price. But speaking of top performers, well, not really top performers. I wasn't speaking of top performers, but I will be now.
You are now.
Top performers. All right, that was a great transition. But one top performer I got to talk to you about is my boy Todd Gurley. I have been waiting for this for like close to a month now since his last really good game.
It was a long time
because
ago.
the offense just went in the tank, and a lot of people just kept saying, "Oh, Todd Gurley's obviously not very good." Hitting
That's
the rookie
because
wall.
they don't understand football.
They don't understand that the passing game in St. Louis was so bad,
and the young offensive line struggles
was also so bad that, and some of it might be on Gurley that kind of missing holes or something like that. But he's slogged through this massive slump of I think 4 or 5 games where he was just not getting the production for a variety of reasons. But now, holy smokes, did that return 16 carries for 140 yards. We're talking 8.8 a carry and 2 touchdowns, both of this stretch for the goal line and get it
beautiful finishes at the pylon that you see from a veteran type of back. Gurley has no fear in the red zone. This thing about him that I love so much is the burst and the power, but his balance is incredible in the hole. He's so tough to bring down because he's so shifty in the hole, and it's tough. I mean, he's not the you don't expect him to be the quickest back in the world, how big he is, but he is so fast, and he's one of the best young talents in the league. And speaking of guys who didn't get enough carries, talking about Doug Martin, I mean, Gurley could have easily got 10 more in this game, and the Rams would have been better off. He could have cracked 200.
It probably should have. I mean, Case Keenum was 14 of 22 in this game for 124
That's
yards.
What I'm saying.
So not great stats, but he didn't cost them the game like he and Foles have done in the past. This is the first win for the Rams in a long time, and it was largely because of number 30, who is fourth in the NFL in rushing yards.
Yep,
in even fewer games than other guys have.
Yeah, he's 5 away from 1,000 or something like that, so he'll crack 1,000 easily. It's been a good year for Gurley, with all things considering, especially with that offense.
So that was definitely a huge one for Gurley, but there's another guy in the NFC West that had a monster game, and it's like becoming kind of commonplace.
No,
it's
point. Not. It hasn't been. It's been a monster month, and the last 4 games for Russell Wilson. Russell Wilson was 23 for 32, 292 yards, 5 touchdowns in this game. His second 5 touchdown pass in the last 3 weeks. In the last 4 weeks, Russell Wilson has 17 total touchdowns and 0 turnovers.
Wow!
And he's doing this without Marshawn Lynch, without Jimmy Graham, and now he's going to have to continue to do it without Thomas Rawls, their backup running back. For some reason,
who had been quite great.
For some reason, without the stars on the offense, Wilson's played better. He looks like he's proving everybody wrong. For all the people who can't think that he's not a pocket passer, that he relies on this. Like, how many times did he run in this game? 1. Carried the ball 1 time in this game and threw for 5 touchdown passes.
Well, I think this is also rewriting the narrative that Russell Wilson is kind of just a product of the Seahawks defense and running game. The defense has been somewhat unreliable. Now it's rounding into form, obviously, giving up all of 2 field goals. But then again, that was against the Jimmy Clausen-led Ravens. Jimmy Clausen has made 2 starts this year, and both of them have been against the Seahawks somehow, because he was first in Chicago and was so bad in that game he got cut, and now he's with the Ravens, and he's playing in the stead of Schaub, who's in the stead of Flacco. So the Ravens have had awful injury problems this year, but they mopped them up pretty easily. But the thing is, Russell Wilson is doing all of this, like you said, in the absence of Lynch, now in the absence of Rawls. It doesn't seem to matter. Doug Baldwin's getting like 3 touchdowns a week on the daily.
It's just unbelievable what Baldwin's
like clockwork
to do.
He's shot up to like one of the top touchdown producers in the league.
He's got 11 touchdowns.
Holy smokes! And they're using Tyler Lockett, who's now much more than just a punt returner and gadget player.
Scored 2 touchdowns in this game, his best game of his young rookie career as well.
So Wilson is the guy right now, and the Seahawks are as hot as anyone, and it's almost all because of Wilson, who's just. That's an unheard of statistical run with all those touchdowns and no turnovers.
When we talk about guys like MVP, obviously Russell Wilson's not going to be up there this year, but like
maybe he should be.
Second half of the season MVP, I don't think you can pick anyone other than Wilson with what he's done the last few weeks. He's been the best quarterback for the last 4 weeks without a doubt.
But you know who has more touchdown passes this year than Russell Wilson?
Did he go to UCF?
Yes, he did.
Yes, he did.
Blake Bortles. Blake Bortles has 30 touchdown passes this year. When was the last time a Jaguars quarterback was at or near the top of the league in anything, really,
it's very
besides
possible
like interceptions.
that we see at the end of the year he has the most touchdown passes in Jaguar history or something crazy like that in a season.
Yeah, Mark Brunell might have been up there or something in the 90s. But, man, 30 touchdown passes, yes, 13 interceptions. But as we were talking about, things weren't looking good for the Jags until Blake Bortles happened. And he had another spectacular game. He had also had one against Tennessee. He threw 5 touchdown passes. They just didn't get the win because of a lot of missed extra points and some shaky defense against Marcus Mariota. But in this case, the defense was much better against the Colts. And he threw for 250 yards, not a ton there, but 8.3 yards per attempt, which is very impressive, and had lots of big plays to Allen Hurns, Allen Robinson. Julius Thomas caught a touchdown for like the 3rd or 4th straight week. Blake Bortles is 23 years old, is in his 2nd season, but he probably could finish this year with 35, maybe even close to 40 touchdowns. And in his 2nd year, and you think, the Jaguars are just still bad. They might not be.
They aren't.
Like,
I don't
even
think
next year, their offense, under the direction of Bortles pulling the trigger, man.
I don't give the Falcons much chance against the Jaguars next week just because they're playing this well. And if I'm the Jaguars GM, I'm pretty pleased with what Bortles and Yeldon and the
Allen boys.
The Allen boys have done. I mean, this offense has real potential. If I'm the GM, I draft maybe one offensive lineman. I need to start selling out on defense. That defense, if the Jaguars can find a defense and some defensive talent, especially with Fowler coming back,
right?
Next year,
Dante Fowler, their 1st-round pick, didn't play a snap.
So this team could be a lot better next year if they start finding some pieces on defense, especially in the secondary, most notably cornerback, who they have literally just about nobody.
Right,
So,
I mean, they have given up too many sacks. Bortles has been sacked 39 times, and occasionally, he had a snap go off of his hands and wind up in the end zone with Robert Mathis covering it up for a touchdown. So there are still obviously mistakes, and you're like, how on earth did he do that? He turns the ball over still too much, but man, the big play potential of this Jaguars offense, I can't believe I'm saying this, is really quite impressive. One of the best in the league, arguably, the Jaguars offense. What am I saying?
So that's the thing. We were seeing these resurgences from the teams we expect us to be terrible, like the Raiders and the Jaguars, because they're getting better because they've found their quarterback. You know why the Browns are still bad? Because they haven't found their quarterback
They
yet.
might have. Manziel wasn't awful, but he's not one of our top performers. But
and he's not the answer there. Just so you know.
Well, we'll see. But who was one of the top performers? We kind of hinted at it before. Odell Beckham Jr. Tell me more about this guy. Also in his 2nd season, speaking of guys playing their sophomore year, boy, no slump there. No sophomore slump for Beckham.
People were expecting, a down year from Beckham Jr. because of, what happened last year at the end of the year.
Well, it'd be hard not to go down from that.
People think he was overrated, and, Beckham's had an up and down year, to be fair, I guess. But he is he is the best receiver in the league when it comes to making plays on the ball, in my opinion. And his route running is solid. It's not great, but it's good. And his speed is what really makes the difference. But just the phenomenal plays, in his first touchdown near the end zone, dragging the 2nd foot, holding onto that football the whole time is phenomenal. Mm-hmm. And then the 84-yard touchdown pass where somehow the Dolphins managed to let him run free right down the seam as free safety Rashad Jones bit on the slant route.
Right, well, he bit on it, and then it was over. It was just absolutely over because he's so fast. And the production here, again, there's been some games that were clunkers from Beckham where he'd have only 3-4 catches, only 40, 50 yards, but yet he is up there with 1,300 yards receiving. I think that puts him top 5, if I'm not mistaken.
And I believe so.
The catches are 85 catches. That's nothing to sneeze at. And he's tied for the league lead in touchdowns. So he's up there at least in catches, in yards and touchdowns, and hasn't caught quite as many passes because he's not a reception machine like Antonio Brown or Julio Jones. But he makes the most of his receptions. He's averaging 15.5 yards per reception.
And then next year, when Victor Cruz comes back and maybe if they draft another young guy, they're going to have more weapons so that defenses aren't allowed to key in on Beckham. The thing is, they're putting 2 guys in coverage. He's still finding ways to get open. And that's just been huge. It's just a big game from ODB. 7 catches, 166 yards, and the 2 touchdowns.
And he made a play at the end of the game to kind of seal it off. They trusted Manning and Beckham to try to get them a first down to really ice the game, and he got it. I mean, just the guy just makes plays. That's what he does. Speaking of making plays, in this, not so much in the passing game, but in the running game, my last top performers, because I couldn't really pick between the two. They both had their really remarkable moments. Both had long, impressive runs. It's a little bit of homer time right now.
Just go ahead and talk about your
Homer
Packers,
time.
Freeman.
The Packers had the most rushing yards they had in the game since 2004.
That's a long time ago.
It's been 11 years since they racked up this many yards. Eddie
What was
Lacy,
the total?
230 yards rushing
That
against the
doesn't happen.
Cowboys. And this is, they out yardaged Aaron Rodgers, which is kind of surprising because you usually think about the Packers and you think of the pass, and especially considering that Lacy has had this weird year where he's either been like apparently hurt or benched because he was out too late or just out of shape or I don't know, but Lacy and Starks just wrecked the Cowboys defense, which maybe isn't saying much, but the Cowboys defense hadn't been giving up 200-yard rushing games. Packers earned this. Lacy looked as good as he's looked all year, 23 carries, 124 yards, found the end zone late. James Starks had 11 carries for 70 yards and had a 30-yard touchdown on a 2nd and 25. Perfect call with the draw there, and he just motored right into the end zone untouched. The Packers, this is an exciting development for me as a Packers fan because the passing game has been so weird this year where
So
Rodgers
bad.
is finding the end zone with touchdowns. He's right up there with the league lead, but not at very many yards. The receivers can't seem to get open or get separation, and they're on pace for like one of the worst passing seasons, probably the worst passing season in a lot of categories that they've ever had with Rodgers. But if the running game can be going, and if Lacy can get hot and just start bulldozing people like he did against the Cowboys, and if Starks can be that second option change of pace guy, maybe the Packers have a shot at it because the defense is actually playing pretty well and held the Cowboys offense, again, maybe not so much, to just one kind of cheap touchdown off of a long run. So really, this is an exciting thing for the Packers. I'm not sure if it fixes all their problems because their passing game is still kind of suspect, but the running game was outstanding all game long against the Cowboys.
Yeah, the offense was impressive from Green Bay, but the best Packer player this week was Sam Shields, without a doubt. He had to leave the game early with a concussion, but one catch only for Des Bryant. In that game, Sam Shields did a great job. But the key of that running game that you're not talking about, I think T.J. Lang and Josh Sitton are the best run blocking duo in the league in terms
great,
of guards.
obviously.
And they struggled early in the season, and it was notable. But in the last 4 or 5 weeks or so, I've seen a lot of improvement from those two, and that's been important for the running game because we know, Lacy's a little on the slower side to get going, but once he gets going, he's tough to bring down.
He runs people over.
So it's important to keep him away from contact, that first couple yards, those first few steps. So they've been able to do that, giving Lacy more time to make cuts and get in the open field, which has been huge.
Hey, actually, tell me how good are Lang and just the Packers' offensive line in general at pass blocking?
Well, Packer fans are very suspect with this. But I think the Packers' pass blocking isn't as bad as people make it out to be.
Good, because guess who's coming to town? Actually, they're going to his town.
Yes.
And guess who have to try to block the man who racked up how many sacks on Sunday?
Cinco. And do you know who's my defensive player of the week?
I think I can
That
guess.
second-year man from the University of Buffalo, sir.
Oh.
Khalil Mack was just unbelievable against the Broncos.
Get excited, Justin
He
Dade.
won this game for Oakland,
Oh, yeah.
in my honest
Yeah.
opinion. So he only had 6 tackles, but 5 of those were sacks, and one of them was a forced fumble that led to a safety to get more points on the board for the Raiders. And, I watched all 5 sacks. I broke them down just because I'm very analytical about it. 3 of those sacks came with just strong right arm contact on the inside shoulder of the right
so
tackle.
he's powerful enough to just shove him out of the way.
So what he did is he takes that that inside arm, puts it on the his inside shoulder, and then he uses his offhand to get to the quarterback, which is just phenomenal.
The strength.
And his initial strength, like you just mentioned, is tough to beat. Obviously, we're talking about Michael Schofield, who nobody knows about. He was probably not very good, but the fact that Mack was able to dominate him for those 4 sacks on his side was impressive. But Mack's best sack, in my opinion, was against the left side when he got the sack on Harris. If you watch that play, he basically knocks the left tackle over, this time with his other hand, knocks him over, gets to the quarterback, and gets the sack. And his last sack in the fourth quarter, this one was straight speed around the edge on Schofield. Beat him just with straight speed instead of the power. Mack can beat you with both arms. Last year, and we could see a good player in Khalil Mack, right? But we weren't seeing the stats that year because
the stats didn't indicate to you, just
Correct.
the basic ones, that it was
and
something
now
great.
he's finishing his plays. Now the quarterbacks are just not. He's a little bit quicker. He's getting there a little faster to get those sacks, and now leads the league in sacks with 14, more than Watt, more than Ansah, more than Dunlap, more than anybody. impressive.
14
for
sacks,
young man.
and 9 of them have come in the last 3 games, so he's obviously on a tear.
Oh, and I forgot to mention, Mac's 5 sacks all came in the second half alone.
So he ruined life for Brock Osweiler. He's going to be seeing him in his nightmares for a while, as will Michael Schofield. I'm just hoping the Packers don't see this guy in their nightmares. They got to play the Raiders out in Cali, and I think Derek Carr didn't obviously have a great game, but I think with the additions of Carr and Mack and Cooper, who also didn't have a great game, but there's some young talent on the Raiders. But there might not be a bigger, brighter star in Oakland or pretty much anywhere than Khalil Mack, who just announced his arrival to all the world to see for that national audience in the late afternoon game. So there is a little bit of news to cover here. Try to get this out of the way. There's a couple of different...
News is important. Don't
news
get
is
it out
important,
of the way.
But Justin, I mean, we got these items, but I want to talk about the just some of that playoff
we'll get to
stuff.
the meat. We'll get to the meat. We'll get it.
Okay. But there are some unfortunate injuries that we have to discuss, and also guys who are still injured and therefore won't be coming back to play. So one of those is Thomas Rawls is going to IR. He broke his ankle in that game against the Ravens.
Nasty injury, really nasty.
Yeah, he kind of got bent and twisted, and it wasn't good. And so he's out, and that's really kind of unfortunate because Thomas Rawls was having himself quite the season as an undrafted rookie. But his season is over, and so this is noteworthy because I don't know when Lynch is coming back
or if he will.
If he's coming back,
I don't think
right?
anybody really knows.
But Rawls has been getting 5.5 yards a carry and had found the end zone a handful of times. Just had been really, really good. I'm not even sure what the options are right now in Seattle.
So let me break that down for you. So just another thing, we got this Seahawks running back shuffle type of thing. So. They signed DeJuan Harris to play in this game, and he got the majority of the carries after Rawls got down. So the Seahawks then decide to cut DeJuan Harris this week and signed Bryce Brown to play. So Bryce Brown is now in Seattle. Bryce Brown will most likely carry the load with Fred Jackson. But another revelation that just came today, they re-signed Christine Michael, whom they traded to Dallas. And then they released him, so now Michael is back. They have 3 guys back there. Who knows who's going to get the majority of the carries really after? I think Bryce Brown will take the most of them right away, but we don't know how much Michael or Jackson will play.
Fred Jackson's no slouch. He's got some left in the tank.
So that's the shuffle there in Seattle. But as well as Wilson's playing, I don't think it matters who's carrying the ball.
It may not matter, honestly. But there was another injury that I think was quite noteworthy. This one in the AFC West, as a matter of fact. Justin Houston he's out for the rest of the regular season at the very least.
Yeah, so Justin Houston, he sprained his PCL 2 weeks ago in the Week 12 matchup. I think it was with the Chargers, but don't quote me on that.
Yeah, that sounds about right.
No, they just played the Chargers, but
they played the Chargers a couple weeks before
right,
that. They've beaten them twice in the last couple.
I don't know if Houston has been playing the last few weeks, has he? But it's the new revelation. Sounds like he's not getting any better, and the run for the Chiefs might take a hit because Justin Houston's going to be out possibly for the rest of the regular season, but could come back for the playoffs. We don't really know, but the biggest injury this week has to come from the hand of Andy Dalton with a fractured thumb.
Trying to make a tackle after he threw a pick in the red zone.
And this one hurts because, Brett Favre had this injury, noteworthy though. He played the game after. Dalton's not going to be able to do that.
It's a different severity of the fracture of the thumb.
Yeah, we think so. So Dalton will probably miss the rest of the regular season, which means A.J. McCarron will have to finish out the rest of the year. I don't think the Bengals are in any, worry of missing the playoffs. But, we'll see what happens with them the rest of the year.
They still have to play the Broncos, right? This kind of ugly loss to the Raiders.
Anybody can win that game for sure.
Right. They also, they have to get at least a couple of these games because Pittsburgh's coming right down. Pittsburgh's real hot. They're 2 games back, and I'm not sure that they're going to lose that division either. But McCarron, who played well, except when he didn't, and threw just an awful back-breaking interception.
Well, see, the thing is, when
touchdown.
When McCarron comes into the game, nobody has film, nobody prepped for McCarron to play. But now the teams that they play the rest of the year are going to prep for only McCarron, and things probably aren't going to go that well for the quarterback from Alabama.
It may not, but he'll also get reps in practice, and that I'm sure he hadn't gotten hardly anything. The thing is, Dalton hasn't missed a game so far in his NFL career. This is the first injury he's kind of sustained.
And I kind of feel for Bengals fans in this one, just because. We know
everything was going so well.
The struggles for Dalton in the playoffs have been noteworthy. I think he gets too much flack for that. But we thought maybe this year would be different. But now they aren't going to finish the final playoff push with Dalton. So now, it feels like it's always something for Cincinnati near the end of the year that prevents them from winning. We'll see what happens when Dalton comes back and if they can get that first playoff win when those
The good
come
news
around.
is he doesn't need surgery, but the bad news is that he won't be playing in the next couple of weeks, and we'll see what McCarron does in his stead. I guess that's kind of the thing that remains to be seen.
And I mentioned, more injuries for the Patriots, but another big one, Devin McCourty, the free safety / cornerback type player that they have.
Very
sprained his
versatile,
ankle.
yeah.
He's one of the best safeties in the league, got paid like it over the offseason. He also will likely miss the rest of the season with the sprained ankle he suffered, and just adding on to the injuries for New England, it's been brutal.
Well, and LeGarrette Blount, like I think I had suggested earlier, he is done for the rest of the season as well. So,
and this Patriots defense is playing pretty darn well too, compared to past years. With they got Jamie Collins and Gerard Mayo in the middle, and Chandler Jones rushing off the edge with Ninkovich and Hightower, but I believe Hightower's hurt as well. So
yes,
things are going south quick for the Patriots, and we'll see if they're able to. They'll get to the playoffs first.
I will continue to suggest, just as long as Brady and Belichick are around, and to some extent as well, Gronkowski's. I think he's just the best matchup nightmare in all the NFL. As long as those guys, especially, are around, and Brady hasn't been hurt yet. Just about everybody else has, but they got Brady. They got Belichick coaching him up. Gronkowski's looks like he'll be fine and just causing terrorizing nightmares for defenses all around the NFL. I think they're just going to be just fine. They can withstand almost any injury.
Yeah, so speaking of teams that have been trying to play with an injury, Andrew Luck was expected to possibly play this upcoming week.
Against the Texans.
But Chuck Pagano came out today and said that that's not likely to happen. Andrew Luck will miss another game, and Hasselbeck will play again for the Colts.
I wonder if this is the end of Hasselbeck's, he had won those 4 games and it looked pretty solid, was avoiding turnovers.
He's been pretty bad since.
But yeah, their losses most recently to the Jaguars, it just got ugly. Hasselbeck has reached his ceiling, but it looks like he's going to have to handle it for another week. And the thing is, though, that the Texans, you would think, oh, this is their golden opportunity to seize that division back in Indianapolis. But the only problem is Brian Hoyer goes out with a concussion after that Patriots game, so it's back to T.J. Yates versus Hasselbeck. The battle.
It's going to be a game of some awful quarterback play.
It might be, although T.J. Yates was not terrible in a couple of spot starts, or maybe one start, I think, and kind of finishing up another game. The Texans' defense can do some good things, especially if Clowney gets going now. I guess we'll see. That's kind of the division.
That's
the
about
AFC
it for
South.
injury news, but a big deal out of Green Bay. Tell me about it.
Well, Mike Daniels is getting paid. I believe the numbers on this was, correct me if I'm wrong, but 4 years and $42 million.
I think that was, you hit it right on the head.
Right, so that's the deal for Mike Daniels, the 4th-year defensive lineman out of Iowa, who has just kind of been really, really solid against the run. He's gotten to the quarterback sometimes. He's got 4 sacks, which you might think, oh, that's not a lot. But that's not really even his job. The pass rushing from him is just a bonus.
Right.
Because he stuffs the run.
3-4, yeah.
He stuffs the run, gets some decent pass rushing numbers. He was a huge cog in that defense that has been very, very consistent. And that's one of the Packers' defense's problems, is the inconsistency. But Mike Daniels has definitely been that, and it's good to see him lock him up. It's not really surprising because Ted Thompson always likes to take care of his own. But draft and develop, I think he was a 4th-round pick or something, and is now being paid as one of the best defensive tackles in the NFL.
It's about time that Daniels has gotten here. But, I've watched him for the most part of the season. I always noted that he makes those impact plays throughout the game that nobody really notices. He makes those plays throughout the game, and I think he's easily the best lineman that the Packers have to offer on defense.
Yep, definitely.
And he played well. Maybe he's playing extra hard because maybe he wanted the contract. But as you said, Ted Thompson always likes to keep his own. But I think this is a good deal for the Packers. It may be a little spendy, but I like what Daniels has done, and his PFF grades have been really good this year as well.
Extremely high. So that is the end of news now, and so wrap up that sort of segment here, and we will now, in just a second here, head on towards some Fantasy Minute news. There was quite a few guys that had some impressive showings on the fantasy world. Something I'm not real familiar with, but Justin will fill you in. So what kind of stuff happened, and who are your studs and duds this week in Week 14
All right,
of the
this
NFL?
is my favorite part of the podcast, Mr. Freeman.
Doesn't last long. Get it together. Snappy.
Excuse me?
I'm trying to get to the playoff discussion.
All right, well, fantasy football studs and duds on Fantasy Pros, Week 14. I started off with Russell Wilson, 31 points this week.
Oh my gosh, I assume that's a lot.
As I mentioned, only carried the ball once. I noted that in the article. Mr. Gurley's on there with 26 points, and then Mr. Baldwin, our third featured stud, with 26 points of his own.
You know it's a good day when you have two guys appearing in studs.
In the last
fantasy.
3 games, by the way, Baldwin has caught 17 passes for 321 yards and 8 touchdowns.
What is that yards per reception? Like 20?
Who knows? But those 8 touchdowns are the best part
Holy
of
smokes.
that. And the honorable mentions, we got Isaiah Crowell, who had a big game for Cleveland.
Oh, yes, he had a couple of long
Odell
runs.
Beckham Jr. on there, of course, and Tyler Lockett, who we briefly mentioned, had a big game with like 140 yards and 2 touchdowns. His best game of his career by far. Your duds, Calvin Johnson, big wide receiver duds this week. Calvin Johnson, 1 catch in this game for 16 yards, 1 point for Megatron.
And they needed him because that game was totally within reach because the St. Louis wasn't pulling away.
Credits Janoris Jenkins and Tremaine Johnson for that shutdown effort. Des Bryant, we mentioned earlier, another terrible performance. 6 targets, 3 of those were drops, 1 catch, no points for Des Bryant.
I
this
actually
week.
saw some speculation that the Cowboys should just shut him down because he's not right, and that might be true. Because really, if nothing's going right with them, they could just shut him down and get him some rest. I don't know if his foot is in any danger of being re-aggravated, but he's been non-existent.
The off season's nearing anyway, so I don't see what matters really.
And Jerry Jones said he's not going to, but it's been a really unfortunate season for Des Bryant, one of the young stars in the NFL. I think he'll be just fine, but not this year.
And our last dud of the week, Amari Cooper, I mentioned already, 8 targets, 0 receptions. Obviously, no points for Cooper.
Has
in this
Cooper
game.
hit that rookie wall? It certainly seems like it.
I mean, possibly. He didn't have a very good game the week before.
It's not like they're not targeting him. Like you said, 8 targets.
8 targets. A couple of those were catchable. I mean, obviously, Chris Harris and Aqib Talib did a fantastic job and have all season. But, those 8 targets, you'd like to see the rookie haul in a few of those at the very least.
And he got none of them.
None. And so my other 3 not so honorable mentions, Ben Roethlisberger, we talked about, no touchdown passes in this game. Latavius Murray, like less than 2 yard a carry average.
Yeah, 16 carries for 27 yards, not good.
For the Raiders. And then Devontae Freeman I put there on the end too. He didn't get much going in this game, also lost a fumble. And just 4 points for Freeman this week.
I think we could safely say that no one on the Falcons got much of anything going.
No, nobody.
And so that is the end of Fantasy Minute, which actually leads us well enough, and this is actually going to be a good transition, I hope, because guess who the Falcons lost to? It was the very much undefeated Carolina Panthers. So we've kind of been doing this every week where it's like...
We've talked about it just once, really. This is the second time we're going to bring this up.
Not Packers. I wish the Packers were in a chance of going undefeated, but the Panthers have already beaten them too. So can the Panthers, rather, do this thing? They're at 13-0. They have 3 games left.
And they don't play any good teams the rest
They
of the
play
season.
the Giants.
That's the best team they play.
They play
left.
the Falcons again, who they have just dropped 38-0 on, and they close the season with the Buccaneers.
I mean, it all is really going to depend on what Ron Rivera decides to do if he wants to sit players. But I don't think Rivera is the type of coach that would do that. Number one,
It certainly doesn't seem
nor
like
would Cam Newton probably go along with that anyway. Carolina's having a lot of fun with what they're doing.
That's what I was just thinking.
Much to my dismay, but
They're just having a blast. They're just out there yucking it up, kind of a thing, and doing this dancing and dabbing and throwing footballs to kids in the
who
stands.
knows what they're doing?
It's just, well, what they're doing is just winning. I mean, they crushed the Falcons. Ted Ginn caught some of those deep passes for once, so he was just wrecking people.
And that's enough talk about the Falcons. Let's more about the Panthers now. But
Man, they made the Falcons look absolutely silly. Man, the Falcons
you
were
want to
just
finish
so
this
bad.
podcast by yourself?
Okay, so the Panthers, but to be fair, no one's beaten the Panthers, and a lot of teams haven't been close. They've clowned the Redskins. I know that they delivered some beatdowns in the division early. I think they beat the Bucks pretty bad last time, who they have again as well. The Giants are an interesting one because I was looking at an ESPN, SportsCenter, whoever had this kind of this little montage of being like, well, the Giants have a history. Obviously, the Super Bowl against the Patriots, they ended the Broncos' undefeated season way back before any of these players were even in the league, so maybe not terribly relevant. But even earlier this year, for all their struggles and inconsistencies, they had the Patriots, who were undefeated at the time, just over a barrel until Tom Brady pulled out a little escape there. So the Giants can do this. We know Beckham is super dangerous, but he's going to have to go up against Josh Norman and earn it there.
And Norman has done very well against every star receiver he's played this year. But another note, too, for Carolina, Ben Wickery broke his leg, I believe, in this game.
Right.
And will be out for the rest of the season, so that hurts. Ben Wickery's played really well. for
Yes,
Carolina.
and also I believe Jonathan Stewart is going to be out.
Yeah, he will not play next
for this
week
game
either.
against the Giants.
Fozzie Whitaker will get the start for Carolina in that one.
Fozzie Whitaker, love that name.
But yeah, Carolina signed former Falcons nickel corner Robert McClain, and they signed Cortland Finnegan a few weeks ago, and they have Charles Tillman. So aside from Norman, it's kind of shaky for Carolina.
It is.
So I think Norman's going to have to follow Odell Beckham all over the field for them to have the same success we're used to. But we saw what happened against the Saints game. You can score against this Panthers defense.
You can if you have the requisite weapons to do that. And outside of Beckham, you wonder, the Giants, I guess
they won't be
Randall
able to run
could
the
get
ball.
open.
I don't think the Giants will be able to run the ball.
I mean, Rashad Jennings had a decent game, but that was against the Dolphins defense, not this Panthers front that has guys.
Do you think that the Panthers will go 16-0? Because I think they will.
I kind of think they will too, and the reason why is the only thing we kind of said it earlier. The only thing would be if Ron Rivera decides to start pulling his guys. Cam Newton's not going to want to do that.
No.
But if there's injuries and he's like, oh man, Jonathan Stewart just got hurt, Ben Wickery just got hurt. If guys start going down and it kind of starts to be an attrition that goes on this team, maybe then Rivera would think twice about leaving the guys in there. But as it stands right now, do I think the Giants are going to beat them? No. The Falcons have proven that they can't even come close to beating them at this point. And I don't know that the Buccaneers are consistent enough and to have the offensive firepower to break this defense.
So I thought I was crazy when I brought this up last time.
Because the Panthers really undefeated. But
I credit to what the Panthers have done this year, but they've had a pretty lenient schedule. And when I looked at the rest of the season, I was like, they can actually pull this off because they don't really play anybody.
That's true. The Panthers are absolutely scary. A lot of people aren't giving them love. I'm seeing a lot of people say like, "Oh, this is like the worst 13-0 team ever." Or whatever.
I disagree with that completely.
I guess I'd have to look at some of the other 13-0 teams. You don't think that the Panthers come on? You think it's the Panthers and what have they proven? But just this season, you can't beat them, and a lot of teams can't come close, as evidenced by the Falcons. So we're enough talk about the Falcons and the Panthers for that matter. How about the New York Jets, who after they started the season 4-1, then had a couple of losses, and people were like, "All right, well that's the end of the Jets, I guess." But 3-game winning streak now. I believe they won back to back to back.
I think so.
And pulled off some comebacks also as well in trying to get to this platform here. So now they are 8-5, and they are in the playoffs as of now. But are they for real, so to speak?
I mean, I think I like this Jets team. I really do. I like what Todd Bowles has done, and what it's going to come down to is whether they can beat the Steelers or not in terms of the race for that wild card spot. That's what it's going to come down to because I think the rest of the AFC is settled for the most part. But yeah, it's going to come down to whether they can beat out the Steelers or not. And I love the way that Fitzpatrick has played this year. Brandon Marshall's been just a beast.
Do you know
all year.
You know what it cost the Jets to get Brandon Marshall?
A 6th-round pick or a 7th-round pick. It's ridiculous.
The Bears gave him away, and boy, has he been spectacular. He had another touchdown. I think he's got close to double-digit touchdowns on the season, maybe even does.
But Ryan Fitzpatrick has been really good, and not many people think he is very good. But
he's been avoiding the turnovers the last couple of weeks, and Eric Decker is just as good of a threat across from him.
Chris Ivory plods along.
Almost 1,000 yards for Ivory this year. So the Jets are for real in the sense that they have a defense that, with guys like Revis and Cromartie, can shut people down to some extent, especially if they're healthy, and they're going to get that way. Revis is coming back. They've got a running game that has been kind of inconsistent, but can certainly do some things. And the only thing I wonder about is Fitzpatrick going to just kind of go Fitzpatrick.
That's what I think it kind of boils
down to.
Will
he eventually melt down and just kind of toss
compare them
hits?
with the Steelers, I think we could easily say, the Jets can score against the Steelers defense, who's been average at best. But, they can maybe do a decent job of shutting down the Steelers' pass offense. But it's going to come down to the arm of Fitzpatrick, whether they're going to do this or not. Make the playoffs is what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
But I think he can do it. It just depends on if they will or not.
So MVP talk, let's get a little bit of that. We had talked about how good the Panthers have been, but does an undefeated season to this point convince you that Cam Newton, as a lot of people are just, all of a sudden there's this narrative out there like, oh, well, Cam's the MVP, almost as if a done deal with 3 weeks to go. Do you buy that?
I just don't see that. I've been a big critic of Cam Newton over his career, after watching him so much, but this has been best year easily by far. And I don't think it's hard to tell if he's getting too much respect or too little at this point for me, because he has had such a great year, but I think they're kind of blowing this whole hype thing out of proportion, with what he does with the footballs after he scores, the dances, the things like that. I think those are helping him a little bit.
Yeah, there's a publicity campaign going on.
I think
it's
the publicity that's helping Cam a little bit right now, regardless of how well he's played. He's played phenomenal this season, and he's gotten a lot better as a pocket passer and without Kelvin Benjamin. But, a quarterback that's done just about the same, if not more, with less, that's Tom Brady.
That's true, but I think the undefeated thing, it's going to be hard for the MVP voters to say that the quarterback, most important position, who's having a great season, of a team that hasn't lost a game, is not the MVP. It's kind of that best player on the best team argument, perhaps. And it's not like Cam's stats have... If you want to throw in the rushing stats, which is a key part of his game, he has 35 total touchdowns, and Tom Brady has 36. So they've been scoring at about this... that's essentially a tie. Yes, Cam Newton has fewer, he hasn't piled up the yards, but he hasn't been asked to. He has well over 100 fewer pass attempts than Tom Brady. If you want to look yards per attempt, Cam Newton is 0.1 better at 7.8 versus 7.7. So I think it's just going to be really hard to say that the guy, if he leads a team to an undefeated season, and that really shouldn't be the determining factor, like, if they lose a game, then he's not, and if they win them all, then he is. But that might be kind of what it comes down to. Right now, I kind of think Cam is the MVP. Just Brady has not had to go without all his number one weapon the whole year. Yes, they've lost running backs, but running backs are interchangeable in New England.
Yeah, but Edelman and Gronk were both out.
Yeah, but Edelman was there for over half the season. Gronkowski missed a game. I mean, he had a number one receiver and has not had him for a single snap. Like, Ted Ginn drops the ball every other time. And what other receiver? Devin Funchess is a rookie. He's throwing the ball to Greg Olsen, who's a solid tight end, but Greg Olsen is not Gronkowski.
Greg Olsen is much better than a solid tight end, sir.
Well, sure, but he's not Gronkowski. Gronk's up here. Even Olsen, if he's the second best tight end in the league, isn't even anywhere close. It's Gronkowski, for crying out loud. So I think the Panthers are going to win them all, and I think for that reason, a good reason or not, Cam will be the MVP.
I think Cam Newton will be the MVP too. But I think if they don't win out, then I think Brady has more of a chance. Personally, in my opinion, and I'm trying to keep bias out of this, I would just want to see Carson Palmer win this thing, even though I know there's not much of a chance for him to do so.
He hasn't had
to deal with the injuries. He's got the best passing platoon between all three of the quarterbacks, and the offensive line has played the best of all three teams. So, Carolina's offensive line has played pretty well for what they have to offer too, but I just think Carson Palmer's had the best scenario, I guess, in terms of the injury department.
Maybe the thing is Carson Palmer won't wind up with the MVP, but I think they're a dangerous team in the playoffs, and we'll wrap this up here with some playoff talk. So, little playoff picture for you right now. At the top of it is the Panthers, unsurprisingly. I guess they're the number one seed in the NFC. The Cardinals are right behind them, and you've also got an impressive performance here in the NFC as well from the Seahawks, who have worked their way into the postseason. They are the number 6 seed. The Vikings are the number 5 seed, I should say. And so the Packers are right up there as well in the playoffs. And right now the Redskins are winning their division, so they're in the playoffs. Who knows if that'll happen or change. So who's the team to beat in the NFC?
I'd have to say, the team to beat. I don't think the team to beat right now is Carolina. Just because they're undefeated, and they've obviously had a great season. But I think a team that matches up really well with Carolina is Arizona. Because we talked about, Ben Wickery's hurt and will miss the rest of the season now. So how is Carolina going to be able to cover, the 4 or 5 really solid receivers Arizona has to offer?
They'll have to do that by maybe scrounging up Norman to get one of those guys. But can you be deep enough to cover Larry Fitzgerald, Michael Floyd, J.J. Nelson, John Brown, Jerron Brown,
That's what
Daniel
I mean.
It's yikes. What is the weakness of the Cardinals? I was thinking about this today. They can run the ball with David Johnson.
A little bit. That's probably
They can run the ball some, but he had 4 yards to carry against the Vikings. They're a pretty stout run defense.
If those two teams were to play, I think the key would come down in the trenches for Carolina. If they can't get to Carson Palmer, I think Arizona has a real good chance of winning that game. But if they're able to get pass rush, especially with Coney Ealy, and they love to run that double A-gap blitz with the 2 elite linebackers that they have, which I think we would see more if those two played, it would just depend on the pass rush, I think, for me.
I would agree with that. I mean, it would be in Carolina, but not like Carolina. They play well wherever. But they don't
It doesn't
have a
matter where
particular
the game
home
is
field
at. No,
advantage.
it doesn't matter.
Man, the thing is, Carolina is so solid in the secondary that they could shut down, I think, the receivers of Carolina, which, as we know, aren't really, they're
Arizona's
suspect.
secondary is as deep as there are in the league.
It really is with Matthew
Patrick
and Buchanan
Peterson's had a
and
really good year,
Peterson
too.
and Bethel and man,
Tony Jefferson.
I wonder if right now the Cardinals. It's hard to say that they're a favorite over a team that hasn't lost a game yet, but I don't think the Panthers have played the caliber of the Cardinals. Because, man, the Cardinals can just do it all, I feel like. And the only problem maybe with the Cardinals is, do you have a pass rush to close out games? But look at Dwight Freeney getting, just enough left in the tank to pull that off.
And personally, the answer really is no. They don't really have the pass rush that most teams usually have that have those elite playoff teams. Calais Campbell does what he can at the 3-4
he's really
DN
quite
position.
good.
He's very good. But they've had a lot of injuries to that position, and I don't know. Like I said, Dwight Freeney is only going to play third downs for the most part. He can't play all of the snaps. There's no way.
No, he's not the spring chicken he used to be.
But another we throw in the Seahawks in there again. And
yes,
you look
they
at
could
when
also
the
be the
Seahawks
team
match
to
up
beat.
with Arizona. Or when the Seahawks match up with Carolina, what do we see? Obviously, Carolina.
Well, the Seahawks should have won that game, except that they kind of blew it at the end and with a defense that is not, was not up to snuff at the time, but now they really quite are. And Russell Wilson's playing out of his mind. So I honestly think it's those three teams, and then it's everybody else.
I agree completely. I mean, the Packers aren't as behind as you might think. I think they're behind those three teams, but I think the NFC has the better talent to offer right now in terms of looking at conference sides. We look at the AFC. Obviously, the Patriots are the Patriots, but now Andy Dalton's hurt, and the Broncos have a quarterback problem, and the Steelers have a so-or-so defense, and the Colts have quarterback problems. So I think the NFC is definitely the stronger this season.
I kind of think that's true, except that it maybe doesn't have the deepness because of that. Because really, there's just I think the field is basically set in the NFC. The Panthers are going to make it. The Cardinals are going to make it. The Packers are going to make it. The Seahawks are going to make it.
It's all just depending on who comes out of the NFC East.
And that team will be irrelevant because they're probably going to play the Seahawks.
I mean, we can't say that, but that's
I'm
what most
pretty
people
sure
would
we can say that. But in the AFC, and we'll kind of close things out on this perhaps. The Steelers right now, as a matter of fact, are actually not in the playoffs. They are behind the Chiefs and the Jets. This is inaccurate here if we look at this, but the NFL.com here is predicting that the Steelers will make the playoffs. But right now, as far as I'm aware, they're actually not, because right now, tiebreaker wise, the advantage goes towards the Jets and towards the Chiefs. The Chiefs all of a sudden have resurrected from the dead, like been on this incredible tear. They've won 7 in a row now. I think it is after the 1-5 start. Are the Steelers going to make it? Do you have them in or do you have them out?
I have them in. I mean, I just feel like the Steelers team we've been waiting. We've seen it week by week. We've seen the good offensive performances. The defense has been struggling, but they've had to deal with the injuries, of course. Le'Veon Bell and Ben was hurt for a while. But I think the Steelers team is a better team, in my opinion, than the Jets. Like we were talking about, it's just going to come down to whether it's the Jets or the Steelers that make it. And I think it's just the offense and Ben Roethlisberger that makes it for the Steelers. It would just be, I just don't think that they're going to miss. I don't know how I'm not exactly sure how they'd make it, but I just don't see how they could miss it. You know what I mean?
Well, if you look at their remaining schedule, that's a little bit of the concern if I'm a Steelers fan, because they do have to play against the Broncos still. They play the Broncos at home. They have to go to the Ravens. It's a division game. Maybe you think, okay, probably not though. I think they can win that game.
They'll at least win
close the season with the Browns.
They'll at least win 2 of those games.
They'll take 2 out of those 3
at least.
And the Jets have to play against the Cowboys, who they can beat easily, I'm sure. But then the Patriots, who I don't think they're going to beat.
You never know though. That'll be a good game. I would think
It could be. And then they play the Bills. So. And I think if they finish with the same record, as I understand it, maybe the Steelers would sneak in just because of the conference record. They're playing all against AFC teams down the stretch, and the Jets kind of beating the Cowboys doesn't really help them because it's not a conference opponent.
Who do the Chiefs have left?
The Chiefs have left, and they might have the weakest schedule of all of these, considering they have to play the Ravens, the Browns, and the Raiders.
Right.
Not a top elite team like playing against the Broncos in the case of the Steelers, or playing against the Patriots with the Jets.
I mean, those are the 3 teams. I leave the Jets out of that for me. I'm sorry, and I talked so good about Ryan Fitzpatrick, but I just don't see the Jets making it in year
I'll
one.
tell you
with
what,
Foles.
if the Jets make it, it will be far more than anyone expected of them.
Absolutely.
But if the Steelers make it, they are a dangerous team
Because
their offense is
they can
crazy.
score against anybody. They saw it against Seattle. They can score any
Up and down the field with big plays out of Roethlisberger to Brown and Bryant and Wheaton and Heath Miller
and
underneath.
D-Will pounding it in the end zone. So
they're dangerous if they get there. They have to get there first. I think both of us think that they will. So it is that time of year. It's approaching Christmas. It's the end of the regular season. Only 3 weeks to go. It starts tomorrow night with the game with the Rams playing against the Buccaneers. But there's some other big matchups all the way from Thursday night football all the way through Sunday night football. That Arizona-Philadelphia game, playoff implications all over the map. So it should be a good one. And we hope you enjoy Week 15 in the NFL. For Justin Dade, I'm Elijah Freeman. This has been Students of the Game, your favorite NFL podcast.